Okay, let's try and get our heads around this. Imagine, right, you start counting money. $1 every single second.
Okay.
How long do you think it takes to hit $1 trillion?
Oh, years, decades, maybe.
Try 31,000 years, non-stop counting, and you still wouldn't quite be at 1 trillion.
Wow. That's a number that's almost impossible to really grasp, isn't it?
It really is.
And that illustration, which comes from this article we're looking at today, it really sets the scene because, according to this source, the U.S. national debt isn't just $1 trillion. It's sitting at nearly $37 trillion right now.
And that's really our jumping off point for this deep dive. We've got this, well, fascinating and honestly kind of alarming article here.
Yeah.
It focuses right on this U.S. debt situation, the big new legislative proposal. They're calling it the OBBBA.
Right, OBBBA.
Yeah, and this, like, totally unexpected political clash is kicked off. You've got figures like Donald Trump and Elon Musk suddenly on opposite sides. It's wild.
So our mission today is basically to walk you through this whole picture. We're going to pull out the key stuff from the article, the big numbers, the details of this bill, which are pretty controversial.
Okay.
The reactions from Trump and Musk and, what it all kind of means for the bigger economic picture and maybe for you personally.
Exactly. So let's start with the debt itself, the scale of it. The article says it's just under $37 trillion. That's as of March 2025.
Yeah.
But it's not just the number now, it's the speed, the pace of the growth. The article gives some incredible historical context on that.
It really does. What's kind of mind-blowing, based on the source, is how fast it's piled up recently. So it took the U.S., over 220 years?
Yeah, from 1790 to 1980.
Right, to get the first $1 trillion in debt. But then the next $36 trillion...
Just 45 years.
Exactly. Only 45 years. The acceleration is just dramatic.
And this new bill, the OBBBA, that the article points out, it doesn't really aim to slow that down, at least not the debt ceiling part.
Yeah.
It actually proposes lifting the legal limit even higher, pushing it beyond $41 trillion. So basically acknowledging the huge number we have and then making room for, well, a lot more.
And to get a handle on what debt this size means economically, the article brings up that key metric economists use, debt to GDP ratio.
Right, comparing the debt to the whole economy's output.
And the U.S., currently at 120.8%, according to this source.
Which is critical because the article references that research by Reinhardt and Rogar.
Ah, yes, their work.
Their work suggests there's this point, a threshold, where high debt really starts to drag down economic growth. And they often pinpoint that threshold around, 90% debt to GDP?
That's the figure, yeah. And the historical pattern they found, which the source mentions, is pretty interesting. Economies below 30% debt to GDP, historically they grew over 4% year on average.
Okay.
But once you get above that 90% mark, growth often seems to dip below 2%. It suggests, just paying the interest on massive debt starts to really hamper the whole economy.
So we're at 120.8% based on the article. Well past that point where growth might slow.
Right.
And now we're talking about a law to allow even more debt, which brings us, straight to this bill, the OBBBA.
The Omnibus Budget and Business Boosting Act. That's the full name. And the source talks about how it just scraped through the House of Representatives. This was May 2025.
Scraped through is right. By a single vote, wasn't it? 215 to 214.
The absolute narrowest margin possible for a bill with such huge potential effects, according to the article.
Okay, so let's break down what the source says is actually in the bill. We'll just report the points neutrally here. First up, big tax cuts.
Yeah, estimated somewhere between $3.8 and $4.6 trillion over a decade.
Okay.
And the article emphasizes these cuts are structured in a way that, primarily benefits the wealthiest Americans.
Right. And there are spending increases in specific areas.
Correct. $150 billion more for defense and $175 billion for border enforcement. That includes ICE funding and expanding the border wall.
Okay, tax cuts, some spending increases. But the source also mentions significant spending cuts elsewhere.
Yes, big ones. Up to $2 trillion potentially cut from social programs. The article specifically names Medicaid and SNAP, the food assistance program.
And the projected impact of those cuts.
Well, the article cites a projection that's pretty stark.
Right.
Potentially 7.8 million Americans could lose their healthcare access by 2034, just from those specific cuts.
Wow. And like we mentioned before, the bill also officially raises the debt ceiling. Lists up to $41 trillion.
Right.
So you put all that together, the tax cuts, the spending hikes, the social program cuts. what's the bottom line for the deficit?
Well, according to the projections the article mentions from the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, which is nonpartisan, and also the Penn-Wharton budget model, which is a well-respected academic group.
Right.
They project the OBBBA will add between 2.4 and $3.88 trillion to the deficit over the next 10 years.
So, adding trillions to the deficit, mostly helping the wealthy via tax cuts, cutting social safety nets, raising the debt limit, and it passes by one vote.
Yeah.
You can kind of see why this bill became such a flashpoint for, well, some unexpected political drama, which the article really gets into this clash between Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
It is pretty fascinating, isn't it? Because you often think of them as, well, maybe not always aligned, but certainly not directly opposing each other like this.
Right. But on this bill, the article reports they're completely at odds.
Yeah.
So the article lays out Trump's view first. Apparently, he called the OBBBA a huge win.
Okay. His reasoning.
He points to the tax cuts, saying they'll drive growth, and also the money for defense and the border. The article even mentions he claimed Musk had initially supported the bill.
Ah, okay. But Musk's reaction, as the source details it, was, well, the complete opposite.
Totally. He reportedly quit his role. He was in the Department of Government Efficiency, BOGE, the acronym was.
Right, DOGE.
Yeah.
He resigned specifically over this bill.
And he didn't mince words, did he? The article quotes him calling it a fiscal abomination. It said it basically wipes out any tiny efficiency gains the government might have made.
And he also reportedly criticized the way it passed kind of secretive, a midnight vote, he called it.
Yeah. And the article makes a point to say Musk's issue isn't just about things that might affect him personally, like, say, cuts to EV credits or something.
Right, that's important.
The source seems clear. His main complaint, as reported, is the massive unchecked spending in the whole package.
And he didn't just complain, right? The article says he's taking action.
Oh, yeah. Reportedly launched a campaign against it on X, his platform,
Oh.
and he's apparently threatening political consequences in the 2026 midterms for anyone who voted yes on this bill. It's a very public, very kind of aggressive stance.
And this whole Trump-Musk split over the OBBBA, it really highlights some of the bigger themes the article dives into about, this whole debt situation and the policies around it.
Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest things the article talks about is what it calls a generational wealth shift.
Explain that a bit.
Well, the idea is when you combine these huge tax benefits that mostly go to the rich, like the bill reportedly does,
Okay.
with really deep cuts to social programs that millions of ordinary people rely on for healthcare, for food. The article argues that's fundamentally shifting wealth upwards, across generations.
I see, a redistribution, but upward.
Exactly. And it also points to how politically fractured things are becoming because of legislation like this. The source knows it's not just Democrat versus Republican anymore.
Right.
It mentions even some libertarian figures, like Rand Paul, are apparently pushing back against parts of the bill, or just the general direction of spending. That one-vote margin in the House says a lot.
It really does. And this whole environment, the massive debt, the political fighting it, has real-world effects on the country's ability to, function. The article talks about losing economic flexibility. When your debt is this high and it's set to go higher, the government just has less room to react, less ability to handle the next crisis, whether it's economic or, something else, or even just to make big needed investments for the future.
So less room to maneuver.
Pretty much. And if you tie all this together, the debt, the controversial bill, the political infighting like Trump versus Musk, this wealth shift idea,
Yeah.
the article suggests it's all feeding into this rapid erosion of trust. Trust in the usual ways of doing things, trust in government, trust in traditional institutions.
Which kind of leads the article to its final point, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Exploring alternatives, because maybe that trust is breaking down.
Exactly. The source brings up decentralized options, and it specifically focuses on Bitcoin.
And how does it frame Bitcoin in this context?
Well, it presents it less as just like an investment and more as a potential escape hatch.
An escape hatch.
Yeah, from the traditional financial system that maybe feels unstable or untrustworthy because of things like the debt and bills like OBBA.
Yeah.
It calls it an act of financial sovereignty.
There's a quote in there too, right?
Yeah. Yes, a pretty striking one. Bitcoin enforces rules without rulers. It represents not just a bet, but an escape hatch.
Rules without rulers.
The idea being, it's decentralized. It doesn't rely on you trusting a central bank or a government whose fiscal choices, like maybe the ones in the OBBBA, are causing people concern.
And the article suggests how people might navigate this.
Yeah, it points towards crypto education. Actually mentions learningcrypto.com by name as a way for individuals to understand these alternative systems, if they feel that trust in the old system is eroding and they want to explore other options.
Okay. So just to kind of recap everything we've pulled from this article in our deep dive, we started with the sheer scale of the U.S. debt, nearly $37 trillion, and how incredibly fast it's grown recently.
Right, the first trillion took over 200 years, the next 36 took just 45.
Then we unpacked this controversial OBBA bill, its key parts, according to the source. Huge tax cuts favoring the wealthy, more defense and border spending.
And paired with big cuts to social safety nets like Medicaid and SNAP, potentially affecting millions. Plus, that debt ceiling increase to $41 trillion.
And we looked at the political storm it kicked off, that surprising clash between Trump, who reportedly praised it, and Musk, who apparently denounced it as a fiscal abomination and quit his government role.
Yeah, detailing their reported views and actions based just on what the source said.
And finally, we touched on those broader issues the article raised. This idea of a generational wealth shift, the political fragmentation it reveals.
The loss of practical economic flexibility for the nation, and this underlying theme of, trust rapidly eroding in traditional government and financial systems.
So this article really paints a picture of some pretty significant challenges, and it raises big questions about the way forward, especially around trust in the systems we currently have.
It definitely does.
Which leaves us, and maybe leaves you, the listener, with a kind of powerful thought to chew on, doesn't it? This growing desire people seem to have for more individual financial control in what feels like a really uncertain world. So given everything the article lays out, the climbing debt, the political fights, the hint that maybe traditional systems aren't as reliable as we thought, what does taking control of your financial future actually mean to you now? And, how do you even begin to evaluate the different paths or systems out there based on this kind of information?